Hi, I'm Judy Morano. Welcome to the show. Today we're here with Linda Dahl, and we'll be discussing some of her new book and some of the things that she's involved in. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Great.
Good, good. So I was doing a little background check on you, and I just found that Brewster wasn't your original home. You were from, where were you from originally?
Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh, wow.
And then I lived in other parts of the Midwest and ended up in New York in my later 20s. So I've been here ever since.
With the goal of being a writer?
Yes.
That was always your focus?
Not always, but as a child, yes, I wrote. I didn't even think about, quote, being a writer. I just wrote stories and stuff. And then as I got older, I really wanted to be a writer, but I was intimidated by all the great writers that I was reading. But yeah, and so New York was
an obvious choice.
A wild and woolly choice in the 70s.
Yeah. And then I know you spent some time overseas.
I did, in Latin America, in Mexico, in Guayaquil, Ecuador, and in Brazil.
Okay. And you're fluent in Spanish?
I am. I'm Portuguese.
And Portuguese. And did you write in Spanish when you were there?
No. Well, I mean, I could sort of write in Spanish, but I'm much better at translating.
Okay.
So that's how I supported myself in New York for a while.
Oh, okay.
Translating dry legal
I was
documents.
a little boring though, right?
Yeah, but who cared? It was, money.
Right. And when you were in South America, were you working as a writer as well?
No, unknown to me, I was gathering all kinds of material for later writing. No, I was working, teaching English, which is what young people do.
Right, right.
And I lived with a family, and then I lived on my own, and became a journalist for a while, writing about kind of off the beaten track cultural things in Latin America. Yeah.
Cool. Do you go back? Have you been back?
I have been back once or twice, but I'm also interested in the rest of the world too. So yeah, I've been traveling more to places like Morocco and India. Yeah.
And are we gathering information for new books while you're there, or is it solely for pleasure?
It's sort of been solely for pleasure, except my next novel.
I knew it.
I think is set in Burma, of all places.
Oh, interesting.
But from an American perspective. So Burma's a great country to visit, by the way, if anybody's interested.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you write both fiction and nonfiction?
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about the fiction stuff first, and then we'll get to some of the nonfiction, some of your newer stuff. You create a story, you have a story, it floats around your head, you say, I know what I'm going to do, or do you create characters and then create a story around them?
Well, the best thing I can say is there's a famous writer. Do you remember The English Patient? It was a novel and then a famous movie.
Yeah.
And the author, Michael I can't pronounce it very well, Ondaatje, he once said that he started writing books when he got little images like looking through a keyhole. And I found that was very apropos for me. It's kind of, it could be it's an image. Sometimes it's something that it just...
Like a moment in time.
Moment in time, or a character, or something you see, or something loaded with some kind of mysterious emotional impact. And then, it just kind of won't leave you alone. It just picks at you, and
And your characters speak to you? Do you feel like, I've heard some people tell me that, like their character, once you get into a character, you know what they're thinking, does that happen for you?
I think, yes, I think you kind of go into the world of the characters, and what's really interesting to me is, and what I like is, for instance, I love to write male characters, which I didn't do too much of when I was younger, because there's that freedom of really trying to understand, regardless of what the person's package is on the outside. And so that's what I love to do, yeah.
So recently, I know you've just written a fiction book.
Right.
The characters that are in this book, where'd they come from?
This is what you might call an autobiographical novel.
Okay.
Because a lot of things that happened to myself and my family, I just felt strongly that I wanted to write it, but as fiction. And there's this process, even when it's not like a memoir or, an essay.
Is someone going to pick this up in your life and go, oh, I see myself in there?
Yes.
They are. Okay.
But on the other hand, they're going to see themselves like through a, like when you go to carnivals and they have those, what do they call them, the funny mirrors?
The fun mirrors, yeah, and everything is a little distorted, a little.
It's you, but it's not you. Yeah, but they're.
And do you tell the people that you're including in your stories that they're being included?
Sometimes.
And sometimes they find out on their own.
But the thing, and that brings up an interesting point, because you don't want to, you want to be honest to whatever is needed to be written. And yet I don't want to, you don't want to hurt people's feelings.
Right.
And that's not my intention. But and there's a lot of humor in it too. I think humor is vital for a
life.
writer, and especially when you have pretty dark material, which this book does.
That just brings up an interesting. A lot of the material that you write there's an addiction sort of flow through it. There's some other real serious issues.
Yeah.
You're taking on such, to me, monumental tasks. Is that difficult? Are you drawing from personal experience? Are you?
Sometimes. Well, I would find it really hard to write, like light fiction. I think it's just a matter of maybe who you are and as a person. But it's the thing is if you're writing a story, so you could say it's about X, Y, or Z, but it's really about people. And if the people in the story are moving and breathing and getting angry,
they have issues.
So that's what it's really about. And it so happens that I'm familiar with that particular world, not so much of addiction as recovery, which I think is something that I want to make a point of stressing. The two do go hand in hand, but we're in a very dark moment historically, because right now we're in the worst health epidemic we've ever had as a nation, with the opioid
industry, yes.
Getting crazier every time you look at it. But but it really comes down to just human beings with all their foibles and flaws and all their their good efforts, rather than thinking of it as about addiction.
Right.
But yeah, it is.
Is there an underwriting message through all this? Is it about recovery? Is it about getting through it? Is that kind of what you want people to leave when they leave the books that they read?
When I wrote it, I was really thinking very much from the point of view of a parent. And I know a lot of parents who are in the situation I was in, with a child who starts out using drugs casually and then ends up becoming addicted seriously. So I really wanted to write from my experience and talk about the things that can hold us back, both to helping our children truly, and also that we can get wrecked in the process, because it's like a war zone when you're dealing with that particular
sometimes
thing.
the caregiver is the one who takes the brunt of what's going on as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then two things happen. They can't take care of themselves, but they're not going to be at all useful to their child that they want so much to help. So I was really looking at kind of the dynamic of, the word denial, I don't even really like it, but things that we don't want to face. I call it the bad dream notebook. In this particular book, the main character, who's a mother, she happens to be an artist, but she has these vivid bad dreams throughout a long period of her life when she's dealing with a lot of difficult things. But not only does she have the bad dreams and remember them, but she decides to draw and paint them. So she moves. So it's kind of like a metaphor too, of being able to say, oh, this is what's really happening, even though it's clothed in dream language.
Right.
It's all the fears and anxieties and anger and sometimes it's good feelings too. So that's kind of what I'm kind of exploring in that novel. That's one of the themes I'm exploring.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of dimly knew that when I started out, but it became
more apparent as you were writing
yes.
it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. That's wonderful. Well, actually, what I'd like to do, as before we move on to some of this nonfiction and some of the other things, we're going to take a little break and we're going to have you read an excerpt. Since we are talking about the book, now seems like the appropriate time for me to have you read to us a little piece of it.
Okay.
And then we'll jump back in and talk about some of the other things that you're involved in.
Great.
Okay? We'll be right back.
Yeah, the excerpt I'm going to read is from pretty much the middle of the book. And just to set it up a little bit, the main character, the mother, Erica, has been dragged, almost kicking and screaming, if you will, to a rehab center with her daughter, Mona, because she now realizes that Mona's really in trouble and needs help. Erica shakes the hand of a heavy-set man sporting a red plaid holiday vest in a cubicle at Wings of Hope, the large rehabilitation center 10 miles from home. Wings had begun life as the bucolic weekend estate of a wealthy alcoholic industrialist who was restored to health by Alcoholics Anonymous way back in the 50s or 60s. In gratitude, he donated the property for this rehab center. The festively dressed, portly man in the cubicle is here to begin the process of restoring Mona to health, although he himself appears, Erica thinks, like a heart attack about to happen. But that's not her problem. Hers is down the hall, getting drug tested. Jack Bunch, intake counselor, he explains, and launches into a discussion of Mona's options, which he's able to do because Mona has waived her confidentiality rights after a long argument with Erica, which had ended with both of them sobbing. I recommend inpatient for at least 60 days, longer if you can. I don't know, the insurance covers 4 weeks. Yes, she can barely pay for more, but shouldn't a month, okay, 28 days of group counseling, institutional meals, and enforced AA meetings be enough? He shrugs, the universal, what can you do body language. Well, we find with this younger population that the more time we can have them, the better the outcome. But here's another option. Let's assume the test is dirty now. So she does the 28, then group outpatient. He hoists a stack of papers. I'll let you know when we have the results. Erica goes back to the waiting room, a clone of all the doctors and hospital waiting rooms she'd spent so much time in with or for John. A television yapping, some talk show, very restful, the old tattered magazines, and the other drooping people waiting like her. Only here at Wings, there's a different atmosphere in the room because they're all parents or lovers or relatives of someone who has crashed and burned and sent shrapnel flying at them because of addiction. After a fidgety 10 minutes, she can't stand it. She goes outside and calls Ronnie. I'm waiting at the rehab center, she says. I don't know if I can go through with this. No, you can't, Ronnie agrees. This is startling. Ronnie, you think I'm going to cave? Come on, I need support. You always have my support, Erica, but this is not something you can do. This is Mona's problem, remember? All you need to do is support her right now. She looked like a kicked dog when we got here. That's exactly what I mean. She's in the right place. I know. Why can't I accept it, though? I feel like I'm abandoning her. Remember when you had to get her out of Brooklyn because she claimed her life was in danger? Remember she sold the car for drugs? I can go on. Right. But this place, it's so institutional. It's depressing. Does the atmosphere of this place, Wings of Happiness, Wings of Hope, does the ambiance there matter? It's a step up, Erica, because where do you think Mona's going from here if she's not stopped? Okay, yes, right. Ronnie's voice softens. You've done everything for her, Erica Mason. Now you've got to let her deal with her addiction. She's in a safe place where she can get well. Yes, and yes. But Erica can muster no optimism, no sense of happy endings right now. Kasho keeps peeing in the living room, she says. Maybe he's trying to tell you something. What, he hates me? Maybe Kasho wants the chaos to stop too. And I'll stop there.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I was thinking as you were reading how many parents could really put themselves in those shoes and feel that, which you were trying to, even if it's a smaller scale or even if it's a bigger scale, I feel like you really touched upon real true emotions that a parent would go through. And very emotional for me to hear, even as a parent, just even if my children didn't have issues, it's very emotional to see any kind of parent struggle.
Yes.
Because, the mama bear comes out, we want to make it better for our kids. And
yes, we do.
Sometimes that's not the road you take. Sometimes it's the tough love road, and that's hard.
Well, even the word tough love is a phrase I think that can be misunderstood, because I think the tough part is the love part we have to remember. Sometimes they remember the tough and not the love.
Not the love part, yeah.
And it's easy to happen because, addiction changes people drastically. The brain can't think rationally. That's been shown by...
It's an illness.
Oh, yes.
And if people look at it like that, I think it gives it a
chronic mental
different
disorder.
Different perspective.
Yes. So with toughness, what we're really talking about is thinking, to me anyway, is thinking about what can I do to help my child stop using drugs, or i.e. get healthy.
Right.
Maybe that's the same thing.
Right.
Versus is what I'm doing helping him or her continue their use. And so it kind of like stimulates your thinking when you think along those lines.
And at the same time, not getting yourself lost in it, like losing who you are as a person, because it's very easy to do that. You get caught up in the whole emotional drama of it. Yes,
and it's not the only thing that can happen with, but since it is such a there's so many aspects of this, as many of us know, and one of the first things I think we need to do is shed as much light as we can on it, and get it out of the closet, because it is a disorder,
right?
And the brain cannot function normally of anybody who's addicted. So
right. Well, that leads me to loving our addicted daughters back to life. And this is our how-to guide, basically. Was that your intention when you started? And basically a guide for parents? Is that what you were trying to do here?
Yes, definitely. As, nonfiction. Yes. I in the process of stumbling along, looking for the right kind of help and treatment, which is, unfortunately what a lot of parents have to do, because it's much harder to deal with this particular illness. I hate to say it, and I've been through this with family members, than cancer, where you basically go to a doctor and get, a package of drugs. Here's the things that you can do for this.
Right.
So I found out a lot about things that affect females, and there's a lot of, a lot of it is biochemical, physiological, some of it is cultural, but there's definite differences between what the two sexes sometimes need.
Did you have any idea going into this that that's what you'd find? Or was that all surprising to you?
No, well, some of it surprised me because it surprised me that so much research has been done and that it's not better known.
Right. Are there other books out there? I mean, are there resources available, or did you feel like you tried to take the best of everything and put it into one place?
There's no resource for the general audience. There's technical journals, there's, for professionals, there's a lot of things out there. It's scattered all over the place. And there's been some really solid research done by different, institutions and research centers. But yes, this is the first book that really hones in on women's needs.
And you've done all the hard work. You've put it all in one place. You've kind of accumulated it all and put it all in one place that's easy.
It didn't feel hard to me because, it's kind of like you just really get into it. And once I started getting into it, it's like a mystery or something that you want to read to the end and see who did it. that's what happens to me when I'm doing that kind of thing.
And I know pieces of this because I've actually read parts of this. Very scientific at times. There's a lot of science involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you a science person always? I mean, to
Not-
me, you're a language person. You're a writer. That's
Not
usually
a science
left brain,
person.
right brain. I
Well, there's a couple among my siblings. There's 2 scientists, and so I guess there's a gene, but that gene skipped me. But the thing is if you're willing to read it through, and oftentimes you can read abstracts that boil it down to a way that makes. And I found that, hey, science can be when it seems to have a direct impact or
right.
implication for your life.
Right.
It suddenly becomes very interesting.
Right. Right.
So yeah.
And I feel like you figured out a way to make it less intimidating, the science. It's a little bit more accessible in here. It's not, because it can be scary, a lot of that technical stuff, and overwhelming. And you seem to have made it a little bit easier.
And by no means did I cover all of it, because when you just start talking, and by no means, we all know this, do scientists understand the brain.
Right.
We're just
right.
beginning
We're starting to learn that.
That's the new frontier.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just amazing what they're finding out. But why, for so long, in a lot of studies where they used mice first, they never used female mice. And this is coming up again and again, also with Alzheimer's.
Right.
PS.
Well, maybe because women and addiction was something we didn't talk about. We talked about men and addiction. It was not that it was out there, but it was less hidden. Maybe that's why we gravitate towards men?
Maybe, but I think, if we remember that by, when was it? The early 80s, our then First Lady, Betty Ford, she was very courageous. She came out and said, hey, I was addicted to alcohol and prescription pain, or not pain, prescription
meds.
And she went to rehab, and then she started the Betty Ford Clinic.
Which is huge.
So at least from the, for the last, 30, 40 years, I think a lot of the stigma has lessened a lot.
Okay.
But research hadn't quite caught up
with it. Well, science tends to do that sometimes too.
Yeah, I
stay
guess
a little behind the times.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, if you had to pick out 4 or 5 points out of this book that you feel like if I was, I think everybody should read the entire thing. I think it's wonderfully written.
Thank you.
But if I wanted to summarize some main points for parents who are on the go, who are maybe feeling there's something going on, what would you guide them to?
Well, first of all, like for instance, in this book, I gathered together lists from reputable sources of all the different warning signs there can be. And what happens is it's usually like clusters of things. I mean, teenagers are moody. I was a moody teenager. But there's kind of like, if you find that things are going on, a bunch of things that hadn't been, and one of the most important things is if your child has suddenly switched friends, and maybe the friends he or she has grown up with, not hanging out with them anymore, and you may not even know who the new friends are, or they seem like, as they did to me, what? Who are these people? That's one big clue. And then you can combine that with things like looking at, do they take care of their basic appearance? And when kids start to get into drugs, especially, also when they're really depressed, but if they're just really depressed, they also should be getting some
help. Right.
Because also, if in time, they may very well turn, to self-medicating to deal with it. So their appearance, changing friends, and then, obviously if you find drug paraphernalia, but, there's just a lot of things parents can look for other than that, but those things are kind of key. So that's one thing. If a parent really, is shocked and amazed that my child is using drugs, and then here comes the big question. I won't even go into it. Like, well, it's only pot. I don't even want to get into that, because the pot that's smoked today is like so much stronger than it used to be back in, say
in the 60s
youth. So that for the teenage brain that's still developing, that's kind of a serious thing, because they don't have much impulse control, among other things. But let's say they've moved beyond that and you know it. Then you have to, everybody who's been through this, all of us who kind of diddled around, our message, and I've talked to so many people, is to parents, take an action. But we want to do it with the right kind of an attitude. It's very easy when you're getting robbed by your addicted child to think, oh, this, so-and-so.
Right.
Or they're wrecking the car, or there's
anger and there's resentment,
there's anger,
and that's not
and
what we
there's
need.
always behind the anger is fear. And dads maybe have a little trickier time with that, usually. And then moms, and I was a classic rescuer.
To make it better.
I didn't really know, and by the time I knew, I was, like you said, somewhat lost in it. But I got help for myself. I would say, there are numerous support meetings around here where we live, like through Drug Crisis in Our Backyard, for instance, and at Arms Acres, and just find out what are the signs of addiction, because those are the symptoms of a disease.
Right.
Just as if you had diabetes, you'd want to know what the symptoms are, or any other disease, so that then you can know, all right, what am I supposed to do? Offer the child choices. It's like it's such a negative situation, and the person who's using drugs is so filled with negativity.
You don't want to add to that. You don't want to add to it and make it.
It's not going to help anything. That's what we learn. That's what they know, is it might relieve you for a second, but it's not going to in any way resolve the situation. So it's kind of like, I know there's something's really bothering you, and you may not want to talk to me about it, but here's 2 or 3 options that I found for you. Which one do you want to pick? Like maybe going to a therapist or an outpatient thing.
Put a little control back in their hands.
They need that. Yeah. They need that sense of,
ownership.
Yes. And to keep having the conversation.
Good.
Because it can take a long time sometimes.
Okay.
Or do you want me to stop now?
No, I want to tell you that this is all so valuable, and I think it's amazing, and I think that there's so much to talk about, and this conversation could go on forever.
It could.
But I think what we've got here is some really good examples of where parents can go.
Yeah.
Things that they can do, and hopefully, in our little small piece of the world, we end up making a little bit of a difference.
I hope so.
I hope so too. I hope so too. And thank you again for coming. Thank you for sharing a piece of your book with us. Again, the other one is called Loving Your Addicted Daughters Back to Life. And this one is The Bad Dream Notebook. And hopefully we will hear from you again. And I can't wait to see what you come up with next out of Burma. And thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Judy.
Okay, thanks.